How can a strip of land, barely 25 miles wide at some points, spark wars, influence global politics, and dominate headlines for decades? This tiny piece of territory is home to millions, yet it's at the center of some of the world's deadliest conflicts. Israel controls it but for Palestinians. It's their ancestral homeland. For the world, it's a geopolitical hotspot that can sway elections, trigger sanctions, and even draw superpowers into tension. Why does everyone fight over this narrow coastline, this small stretch of land? The answer is more than just history, more than religion. It's about survival, strategy, and power. In the next 15 minutes, we're diving deep into why Israel holds this strip, why the world watches it so closely, and why the conflict here refuses to end. Asterisk, to truly understand why Israel controls this tiny strip, we need to go back thousands of years. This narrow coastal corridor sits at the crossroads of Africa and Asia, a place where empires rose and fell, trade routes crisscrossed, and armies marched. Romans, Crusaders. Ottomans all fought over it because it was the gateway to wealth, power, and influence. Religions intertwined here too. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all claim deep connections to this land, making it not just strategic, but sacred. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the story becomes even more complicated. After World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition this land, creating a homeland for Jews while leaving space for Palestinians. Wars broke out almost immediately, and borders shifted dramatically. Israel emerged, controlling key parts of the territory, seeing it as essential for national security, but Palestinians never fully accepted these borders, claiming rights to land they've lived on for generations. Today, this tiny strip isn't just about local control, it's a global flashpoint. The United States, the European Union, Arab states, and even distant powers like Russia and Iran have stakes in what happens here. Ports, natural gas fields, trade routes, and military strategy all make it worth more than its size. Yet, at its heart, the conflict is deeply personal for the people who live here, and deeply symbolic for the billions who follow it around the world. In this video, we'll break down the history, the strategy, and the human stories behind why Israel controls this strip of land, why everyone still fights over it, and why the world can't look away. Asterisk. This tiny strip of land has always been a crossroads between continents, connecting Africa and Asia for thousands of years. Empires have risen and fallen here, from ancient Egyptians to Mesopotamian kingdoms. Because controlling this narrow corridor meant controlling trade and influence, Romans, Byzantines, and later Crusaders all recognized the strategic value of the land, building fortresses and trading ports along the coastline. Every time a new power emerged, they fought to hold this strip because losing it meant losing access to the broader region. The Ottomans ruled the area for centuries, creating a relatively stable administration but never fully resolving the tension between local communities and external rulers. The land remained a melting pot of cultures, religions, and languages, making it both rich in diversity and fraught with conflict. Religious significance further complicated its history, as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all regard the land as sacred. These overlapping spiritual claims have fueled centuries of contention, as each group views the territory as central to their identity and faith. Trade routes and economic importance made it impossible for empires to ignore this land. Merchants, armies, and pilgrims all passed through, leaving behind a legacy of cultural and strategic importance that still resonates today. Even before modern borders existed, this strip was a prize for any empire seeking influence in the region. Whoever controlled it could project power across the Eastern Mediterranean and the Levant, making it a perpetual hotspot for conquest. After World War II, the United Nations proposed a partition plan to divide the land between Jews and Palestinians. The plan was meant to create a Jewish state while protecting Palestinian communities, but it immediately triggered resistance and war. When Israel declared independence in 1948, neighboring Arab states invaded, leading to the First Arab-Israeli War. The outcome shifted borders, with Israel gaining control of strategic corridors and key coastal areas that were not initially part of the UN plan. Israel's leaders viewed this strip as vital for national security, acting as a buffer against potential invasions. The narrow geography of Israel meant that controlling this land was essential to prevent neighboring armies from easily penetrating its heartland. The area also contained critical infrastructure, including ports, roads, and access to trade routes. Maintaining control allowed Israel to ensure economic stability and connect its population to global markets. Military strategy played a central role in territorial control, as holding high ground and coastal access gave Israel a defensive advantage. The lessons from past wars underscored that even a few miles could determine the survival of the state. Palestinians, however, saw this loss as a profound injustice, creating a cycle of resistance and insurgency that continues to this day. Their claim to the land is rooted not only in residence but in centuries of cultural and familial ties. The struggle over the land became as much about identity as it did about strategy. For Israelis, the Strip represented survival, while for Palestinians, it represented home and heritage. The Cold War further complicated the conflict, with the United States supporting Israel and the Soviet Union backing Arab nations. This turned a regional dispute into a global chessboard, where superpowers projected influence through alliances and arms deals. Oil politics intensified the stakes as Arab nations wielded energy resources to pressure Western countries into supporting Palestinian claims. This made the tiny strip of land a critical piece in global economic calculations beyond the Middle East. Religious identity amplified international involvement as billions of believers around the world closely followed events on the ground. For many, the conflict is a moral and spiritual concern, not just a political one. Palestinian nationalism grew in response to displacement and occupation, leading to uprisings and protests that drew worldwide attention. Each flare-up reminded the world that control over this land could not be settled by borders alone. The United Nations has repeatedly intervened, issuing resolutions and peace proposals, but enforcement has always been limited. International diplomacy has struggled to balance strategic interests with human rights and historical claims. Global media has amplified the tension, broadcasting conflicts and crises to billions of viewers. This constant visibility ensures that the world never forgets the stakes of this tiny strip of land. Even in times of relative calm, the strip remains a flashpoint because of its symbolic significance. Its history, religion, and geography make it impossible to ignore or resolve. Israel maintains tight control over security, using walls, checkpoints, and military patrols to protect its population from attacks. These measures are controversial, but leaders argue they are necessary to prevent infiltration and violence. Palestinians live under restrictions that limit movement and access to resources, fueling frustration and anger. Their struggle for sovereignty continues as they demand recognition of their rights and territory. Regional powers like Iran, Turkey, and Gulf states see the conflict as a way to extend influence and challenge rivals. This turns local clashes into broader geopolitical struggles that can affect global stability. Economic interests, including ports, trade routes, and offshore gas fields, add another layer of complexity. Whoever controls the land can secure significant resources that impact national economies and global markets. The conflict also shapes international public opinion, with protests, activism, and lobbying influencing governments and policy decisions worldwide. This ensures that no resolution can happen without global attention and involvement. Despite decades of negotiations, peace deals, and treaties, the land remains contested. Historical grievances, religious significance, and strategic importance collide in a way that keeps the conflict alive. Ultimately, the Strip represents more than territory. It embodies survival, identity, and influence. The fight over it is as much about the hearts and minds of people as it is about borders and armies. Israel controls it because of wars won, borders drawn, and strategic necessity. Palestinians contested because of ancestral ties, identity, and international law, making compromise extremely difficult. Global powers continue to intervene because the stakes extend far beyond the region. This small piece of land has the power to influence alliances, economies, and even elections worldwide. No matter how small it appears on a map, this strip is at the center of one of the most enduring and complex conflicts in human history. Its story is a lesson in how geography, history, and identity can shape the destiny of nations and the world. The conflict over this tiny strip of land is far from just a local issue. It is a story of history, identity, and survival that has captured the attention of the entire world. Israel controls it for security, strategic depth, and access to critical resources. Palestinians contest it because it represents home, heritage, and justice. Centuries of empires, wars, and negotiations have shaped the current reality. Every generation carries the memory of loss and the hope for recognition, making compromise extremely difficult. Global powers remain deeply involved as the region affects alliances, economies, and political influence far beyond its borders. The stakes are high, and every decision echoes around the world. Despite numerous peace talks, treaties, and interventions, the situation remains unresolved. The tiny strip continues to be a flashpoint where history, religion, and strategy collide. For Israelis, it symbolizes survival and security. For Palestinians, it embodies identity and justice. For the world, it is a reminder of how geography and history can shape global events. Until these layers of conflict, culture, and politics are reconciled, this strip will remain one of the most contested pieces of land on Earth. Its story is far from over, and the world will continue to watch closely